Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to our mini series, Learning Together, here on the Recovery Couch. I'm your host, Brandon Couch, and I just want to remind you to go check out my book, Step 4, A Journey Through Addiction. It's available on all major retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. Or you can also get it at my website, www.recoverycouch.com. Also, like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Greg Swartz at Remax Victory and Affiliates. Greg is honest and he has a humble approach to selling homes. If you need to call Greg, call him today. Also, thank you to JB Davis at South Dayton Toyota. JB works with honesty and integrity to get you in the car that you need. Make sure to go see JB and his team and tell them the Recovery Couch sent you. So today we're jumping into information about narcotics. Last time on Learning Together, this mini-series, we talked about quaaludes, methylqualone, and its effect on the human body. So we're going to continue to go through the Getting Ready to Test, a review preparation manual for drug and alcohol credentialing. And the next section in the book, after the methylqualone, is information about narcotics. And narcotics are derived from naturally occurring substances and can also be manufactured synthetically. Narcotics, or opiates/opioids, are drugs that cause sedation and euphoria by causing depression of the central nervous system. We talked about the central nervous system back in episode 1 or episode 2 of this mini-series, Learning Together. Narcotics are used medically to relieve pain, suppress cough, and control diarrhea. Some narcotics, such as heroin, have no medical use, and any possession or use is illegal. Overdose can cause death by respiratory depression. I don't know if a lot of people understand that's typically what fentanyl, heroin, or any sort of opioid overdose typically is from, is respiratory depression. Narcotics can cause both physical and psychological dependence, which makes them super dangerous. Narcotics impair a person's ability to drive, and these drugs can damage any sort of developing fetus. Narcotic abuse is linked with the spread of AIDS due to the use of needles. The facts on narcotics are that the term narcotic is used to describe the family of drugs that are used as an analgesic, which means pain relieving, an analgesic compound, and occasionally these drugs are used to induce sleep. Sometimes referred to as opiates because they are derived from the opium poppy plant or made synthetically to have the same actions as morphine, which is a major ingredient in opium. The family of drugs may actually be broken into 3 different classifications. 1, natural occurring compounds such as opium, morphine, and codeine. 2, semi-synthetic compounds such as heroin and hydromorphone, derived by modifying the chemicals produced in opium. And 3, synthetic compounds made entirely in the laboratory such as Demerol, methadone, and Darvon. Narcotics have a wide range of medical use, including pain relief, treatment of diarrhea, and cough relief, as we've discussed prior. And these compounds are also highly addicting. Heavy use of such drugs, or even occasional use over a long period of time, will produce tolerance, psychological need, and physical dependence, as evidenced by the appearance of withdrawal symptoms upon cessation of use. Narcotic drugs also depress central nervous system functions. They produce euphoria in the user, provide a sense of well-being, and produce drowsiness that may lead to sleep. The exact effect of most narcotics depends on the individual. If the person is in pain and taking narcotics, they tend to feel less anxious and find relief from the pain. If the person is taking the drugs for reasons other than pain killing, the same dose would probably produce mental distress, such as fear and nervousness, as well as nausea and possibly even vomiting. Opium is the main source of the natural occurring narcotic drugs. It is produced from the poppy Papalver somniferum. Papalver somniferum. This poppy is cultivated in many countries of the world, including Turkey, India, China, Thailand, Laos, Laos, and Mexico. Opium is derived from the unripe poppy pod prior to the development of seeds. The method of extraction is centuries old. A knife is used to split the pod, then a milky fluid oozes from the seed pod and allowed to bleed overnight. The next day, the dried product is scraped off the leaves. So they slice it, let it bleed, leave overnight. The product dries. Then they come back, scrape it off the leaves, producing a brownish gum known as crude or raw opium. The dried opium is generally smoked and the vapors inhaled. Occasionally, the crude product is ingested orally. The compound was widely used throughout the world until the beginning of the 20th century. So this was a worldwide epidemic until the beginning of the 20th century. The drug is not as popular today due to the strength of action and bulk of the compound, which makes dealing the drug difficult. It is legally imported for the production of other legal derivatives and is illegally imported for the manufacture of heroin. So this is where heroin comes from, if you didn't know. It comes from the opium fields and the same process that we just talked about. So the main sources of heroin and the poppy are going to be coming from Turkey, India, China, Thailand, Laos, and Mexico, which is why there's a cartel or black market. So morphine is the main alkaloid ingredient of opium, having a purity of from 4 to 21%. It was isolated from opium in 1803, and it is used in medicine as a sedative and a painkiller, being one of the most effective painkillers known to man. Large doses have been used to provide anesthesia in heart surgeries because, unlike anesthetic drugs, morphine has no depressant effect on the cardiovascular system. So, when we talked about the overdoses earlier and how respiratory depression is one of the main reasons for opiate overdose, one of the reasons why morphine is you're less likely to overdose on is because it has no depressant effect on the cardiovascular system. Morphine is also used to control post-operative pain. Morphine is available in tablets and in an injectable form. A white crystal form is illegally available on the street. The drug is usually administered IV or IM for the greatest effect. And when used non-medically, the drug produces a euphoric high, a sense of well-being, and drowsiness. Tolerance and physical dependence may develop rapidly depending on the dose and frequency of use. Codeine is another alkaloid found in opium, though most codeine is manufactured from morphine. Being a derivative of morphine, codeine has high pain-killing properties, though it is only about 1/10 as potent. Its greatest effect is as antitussive, cough relief, though it is also sold combined with aspirin or acetaminophen as a painkiller. Though potentially addictive, it rarely causes problems when taken under medical supervision for a short period of time. Because of this, it is most widely used naturally occurring narcotic in medical practice. So then we move to semi-synthetic compounds. Hydromorphone, more commonly known as Dilaudid, is a chemical variation of morphine. It is sold in tablet and injectable form. It is a shorter acting and more sedative drug than morphine, and its potency is 2 to 8 times that of morphine, making this compound a highly addicting drug. Oxycodone is chemically derived from codeine, though it is more potent than codeine. It produced potent euphoria, analgesia, and sedative effects, and has a dependence potential similar to morphine. One of its major advantages in medicine is that, unlike many other powerful narcotics, it retains its potency when administered orally. As a result, it is both widely used and abused. It is generally sold as a combination drug, either as the drug Percodan, oxycodone, ASA, and caffeine, or as Percocet, oxycodone, and acetaminophen. Heroin is a chemical derivative of morphine, initially introduced as a cure for opium and morphine addiction. That's crazy, huh? So, heroin was originally introduced as a cure for opium and morphine addiction. And now it's one of the most widely exposed epidemics, addiction epidemics, at least in North America. It is the most popular narcotic of abuse in the United States, accounting for 90% of all cases of abuse. It is one of the more powerful addicting compounds known to man. Available over the counter until 1914, the drug has no medical use today, meaning it's strictly a street drug, though it is being investigated for possible use as a pain-relieving drug with cancer patients. It is a white powder with a bitter taste that may also be found in a variety of other colors, from black to dark brown, depending on the impurities from the manufacturing process. Heroin is usually mixed into a liquid solution and injected directly into a vein or injected just under the skin. It can also be snorted or taken orally when in powdered form. Because of its chemical structure, heroin reaches the central nervous system more rapidly than morphine. Shortly after using the drug, it creates a rush of intense euphoria. The faster the drug reaches the central nervous system, the greater the rush. After the effects of heroin wear off, the addict usually has 8 to 12 hours in which to find the next dose before withdrawal symptoms appear. Heroin acts primarily on the CNS and parasympathetic nervous system, producing drowsiness, mental clouding, and reduced ability to concentrate. Many people report a reduction in feelings of aggression, depressed appetite, and sex drive, and a general decline in the level of physical activity. Moderate doses can cause feelings of body warmth, heaviness of the limbs, itchiness of the nose, constipation, and constriction of the pupils. Larger doses lead to sleep, decreased blood pressure, and slowed breathing. Heroin tolerance develops quickly to most of these effects, so addicts are able to take many times the normal lethal dose without significant effects. At this stage, the drug is taken solely to prevent withdrawal. During early use, there is a great danger of accidental overdose. Combining other drugs with heroin also presents a greater risk for physical problems. A popular combination of heroin and cocaine, called a speedball, is responsible for a great many deaths, especially some well publicized cases from Hollywood, i.e., John Belushi. Additionally, heroin is typically cut with other adulterants in order for the dealer to turn a higher profit on sales. Such substances as powdered milk, quinine, starch, sugar, Ajax, any white powdered substance have been found in batches of the drug. These adulterants can create their own risk to physically, excuse me, these adulterants can create their own risk to physical health and well-being. Heroin also possesses a high potential for psychological and physical dependence and may lead to social deterioration, reduced motivation, or infection from the use of non-sterile needles. Because of the user's rapid development of tolerance, larger and larger doses are required to get high. This often results in the user turning to criminal acts to maintain their addiction. Heartbreak. So those were the semi-synthetic compounds. We discussed hydromorphone, which is more commonly known as Dilaudid. We discussed oxycodone, which is more commonly known as Percodan or Percocet. We discussed heroin, semi-synthetic compounds. There are also narcotics that are synthetic compounds. In contrast to the opiate drugs derived either directly or indirectly from naturally occurring compounds, the synthetic narcotics are derived entirely within the laboratory setting. It means they are made in a laboratory. Indeed, the majority of investigation that is occurring in pharmaceutical laboratory settings is in an effort to develop either analgesic compounds that retain the pain-killing properties of morphine without the dangers of tolerance and physical dependence, or anesthetic agents. As a result, there are several compounds that have been discovered to relieve pain. The more commonly used drugs are described as follows. Meperidine, which is trade name Demerol, was the very first synthetic narcotic ever produced. It was discovered in the early 1930s, and it has similar properties of morphine, though it is less potent, and unlike many other narcotic drugs, it retains much of its potency when administered orally. Tolerance to the drug's effects develops gradually. Therefore, it can be used effectively for several weeks at the same dose. In spite of this, both physical and psychological dependence can develop with long-term use. Because of its use in medical settings, meperidine is the most commonly reported drug of abuse among physicians and nursing professionals who are dependent on narcotic agents. I think that's noteworthy. So, with within the medical professional field, doctors and nursing professionals who find themselves addicted to drugs, the drugs that they can prescribe, meperidine is the most commonly reported drug of abuse among those medical professionals, including physicians and nursing professionals. The next synthetic compound we're going to discuss is methadone, trade name Dolophine, which is a synthetic narcotic similar in potency to morphine. It was first synthesized by a German chemist in 1943 as a substitute for morphine, which was unavailable in Germany during World War II. It's been widely used in the treatment of heroin addiction and is also useful in managing the withdrawal effects of narcotic drugs. The compound has a longer effect lasting from 24 to 36 hours and is highly effective when administered orally. Thus, the drug can be given once a day in detoxification or maintenance programs. Additionally, the drug appears to block the effects of other narcotic drugs, making methadone a valuable tool in the treatment of heroin and other narcotic addictions. As with other narcotics, the drug produces physical and psychological dependence, though such effects develop more slowly with seemingly less severity. The next synthetic is buprenorphine, and it is an opioid partial agonist. This means that although buprenorphine is an opioid and thus can produce typical opioid agonist effects and side effects such as euphoria and respiratory depression, its maximal effects are less than those of full agonists like heroin and methadone. At low doses, buprenorphine produces sufficient agonist effect to enable opioid-addicted individuals to discontinue the misuse of opioids without experiencing withdrawal symptoms. In October 2002, the Food and Drug Administration, aka FDA, approved buprenorphine monotherapy product Subutex, and buprenorphine naloxone combination Suboxone for use in opioid addiction treatment. The combination product is designed to decrease the potential for abuse by injection. These are usually sublingual tabs that people place under their tongue to dissolve, which will then get the buprenorphine into the bloodstream. I believe that the difference between Subutex and Suboxone is that Subutex does not block the effects of the full opioid agonist, but I could be wrong on that, but I do believe that to be true. The next synthetic compound, propoxyphene, trade name Darvon, and it was first marketed in 1959 for the relief of mild to moderate pain. It is one fifth to 1/10 as potent as codeine, making it only slightly more potent than 2 aspirin. In spite of this, it continues to be one of the most prescribed analgesics with more than 30 million prescriptions written each year. It is favored by physicians because it is less dependence producing than other narcotics. The next synthetic compound is pentazocine. It was synthesized in 1961 and introduced as an effective analgesic without the dependency problems associated with other narcotics. Many abusers compare this drug's effects to that of marijuana. Additionally, when mixed with an over-the-counter antihistamine, this drug produces heroin-like effects. The combination is also known as teas and blues. The next is OxyContin, which is the brand name for a semi-synthetic opioid analgesic prescribed for chronic, moderate to severe pain. Its active ingredient is oxycodone, which is also found in drugs like Percodan and Tylox. It is more potent than hydrocodone and has a greater potential for abuse. Oxycodone is also found in at least 45 other drugs on the market, including Percocet. OxyContin contains between 10 and 160 milligrams of oxycodone in a time-release tablet. Painkillers such as Tylox contain 5 milligrams of oxycodone and often require repeated doses to bring about pain relief because they lack the time-release formulation. Since hitting the U.S. market in 1996, OxyContin has become one of the most popular and most abused medical painkillers. More than 7.2 million prescriptions were dispensed annually since 2001. According to the company, it is a time-release narcotic which provides continuous relief for up to 12 hours. Like other opioids, it works primarily through interaction with the mu-opioid receptors, especially in the brain and spinal cord, producing a euphoric effect. That's all we're going to cover today. These are the narcotic drugs. And again, I want to thank our sponsors so much, Greg Swartz at Remax Victory and Affiliates and JB Davis of South Dayton Toyota. Without them, this podcast would not be possible. I want to remind you, go and check out my book. I've got a lot of great feedback on the book. And you can get it on my website, www.recoverycouch.com. It's also available on Amazon or any major book retailer. So again, I just want to thank you guys for tuning in. And remember, you always have a seat right here on the Recovery Couch.